The fall of humanity's glory. The Galactic Council had been in power for centuries, its influence stretching across the stars. Its members, alien species from every corner of the galaxy, held complete control over the fate of every civilization, big or small. But there was one race that stood out among them all: humanity. Humans were not the strongest or the most advanced, but they had something the Council could never fully understand: unshakable will to survive. Yet, despite their resilience, the Council had decided to exile humanity, a mistake that no one could have predicted. It all started with a vote, one that humans had no say in. The Council had watched humanity's rise, their rapid technological advancements, and their growing influence in the galaxy. Some of the Council's members feared that humanity's strength would one day rival their own. The Council's most powerful leaders, terrified of losing control, made the decision to exile Earth and all human colonies. They were banished to the farthest reaches of space, where they would be isolated from the galaxy and forgotten. The moment the announcement was made, a wave of disbelief swept across the human race. How could this happen? The Galactic Council had always seemed untouchable. For generations, humans had been subjugated, but now they were forced to live in the outermost corners of the universe. Their cries of protest echoed in the empty chambers of the Council, but it was no use. The Council had spoken. Humanity was cast out, forced to survive on barren, uninhabitable worlds with nothing but the technology they could salvage. As they looked to the stars, they saw the galaxy that had once been theirs, now forever out of reach. The thought of never returning to the heart of civilization was unbearable, but in that moment of despair, something changed. Humans were not known for giving up easily. They were survivors in the outer reaches of space. Humanity began to rebuild. They formed tight-knit communities, relying on each other for survival. The technology they had brought with them, though primitive by the standards of the Galactic Council, was enough to help them survive. But there was something else. An ancient legend, passed down through generations, spoke of a hidden weapon, one that could turn the tide against any enemy. Even the Council, deep in the bowels of their new home, a group of human engineers discovered the remnants of an ancient warshipper ship unlike anything they had ever seen. It had been abandoned long ago, buried beneath layers of rock and dust. As they unearthed the ship, its power systems slowly hummed to life, and humanity's hope was reignited. This was the weapon that could change everything. The ship was unlike anything the humans had ever imagined. It was massive, with dark metal armor and weapons powerful enough to wipe out entire fleets. But the most remarkable thing about it was its technology far beyond anything the humans had ever encountered. The ship's systems were ancient, yet perfectly preserved. It was as though the ship had been waiting for this very moment to awaken. As the engineers worked tirelessly to bring the ship online, word of its existence spread. The human colonies, once scattered and isolated, began to unite. They understood that this was their chance to take back what had been stolen from them. They began to gather their forces, ready to strike at the heart of the Galactic Council. The Council had made a grave mistake. They thought they could cast humanity aside. But they had underestimated the human spirit. But the Council wasn't blind. They had seen the reports of human activity in the outer reaches. Whispers of a forgotten weapon spread across the galaxy. The leaders of the Council had known that humanity would not go quietly into exile. They had prepared for this day, but even they were not prepared for what they would soon face. A fleet of human warships, old and forgotten, began to gather in the shadows of their new home. Each ship was a relic of humanity's past, built long before the exile, during a time when humanity had known greatness. These ships had been abandoned, but now they were being brought back to life. They were old, but they were powerful, and, more importantly, they were ready to fight as the humans prepared for their first strike. They realized that they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their dignity, for their place in the galaxy. The Galactic Council had cast them out, but now it was time for humanity to show them just how wrong they were. The ship's engines roared to life, and the humans set their course for the heart of the galaxy. The first battle was swift. The humans launched their surprise attack against a small council outpost. The council's forces were caught off guard, and they had no chance against the power of the human warships. The victory was immediate, but it was only the beginning. The humans knew that they had to send a message to the council. This was just the beginning of their return. As the human warships left the council outpost in ruins, a sense of unity spread among the human colonies. They were no longer scattered, no longer alone. They had a purpose now to reclaim their place in the galaxy, to take back what had been stolen from them. The council had underestimated humanity, and they would soon learn just how dangerous a race could be when it had nothing left to lose. As humanity's ships soared through the stars, their shadow began to grow longer. The Galactic Council had made a mistake, and soon they would understand the true cost of exiling humanity. Awakening the storm. The stars had always been a source of awe and mystery to the human race, yet now they represented something far more important, a symbol of their rebirth. The once forgotten ship, buried deep beneath layers of dust and rock, had awakened. It was not just a ship. It was humanity's greatest hope, their weapon of retaliation against the Galactic Council. The engineers who had first discovered it now stood before the massive, dormant warship, knowing that the future of their entire species rested on their ability to bring it to life. Months of painstaking work followed. Every part of the ship was a mystery. Its systems were unlike anything the humans had ever encountered. But the engineers pushed forward, refusing to be defeated by the complexity of the technology. Slowly, piece by piece, they unlocked the secrets of the ancient ship. Its weapons systems hummed with power, and its engines roared to life, breaking the silence that had held it in stasis for centuries. Humanity's banner, once cast into the void, was now being carried back into the galaxy, and then it happened. The ship's sensors detected something. A fleet of council ships, moving at full speed toward the isolated human colonies. The Galactic Council, aware of the growing human presence, had decided to crush them before they could rise. They had no idea what they were up against. Humanity's enemies underestimated them, assuming their exile had left them powerless. They were wrong. The first battle was not one that the humans had planned. It was a test. A single council fleet, consisting of 10 warships, arrived near the outer colonies. The human fleet, made up of remnants and abandoned vessels, was no match for the sophisticated technology of the Council. Or so the Council thought. Humanity's warship, however, was not a relic. It was a weapon designed for this very moment. The battle began in a flash of light. At first, the Council ships had the advantage. They had superior numbers and technology, their weapons raining down on the human fleet from above. But the humans were quick to adapt. The ancient warship, now fully operational, moved like a phantom through space, its weapons decimating the enemy ships with precision. The humans had learned from their past mistakes. They were no longer just survivors. They were fighters in the midst of the chaos. One of the human fleet's command as a seasoned fighter named Captain Elias. A bold move. He knew that the Council fleet's central command ship was the key to defeating them. If they could take it down, the rest of the fleet would fall apart. The humans had one shot. Captain Elias issued the command, and the human warships converged. On the Council flagship, the battle raged on around them, but Elias had one goal in mind: the heart of the enemy. His ship, a refurbished destroyer, soared toward the command ship, weaving through enemy fire with skill and determination. The human ships, once thought to be obsolete, proved to be more nimble and efficient than the Council had anticipated. The flagship was in sight. The Council officers aboard the ship scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The human fleet had breached their defenses, and Captain Elias' ship, with its weapons primed, opened fire. A blast of concentrated energy tore through the command ship's shields, then through its hull. The explosion was immense, sending shockwaves through the surrounding fleet. The Council was stunned. Their flagship was destroyed in seconds, and the rest of their ships scattered in panic. The humans had won. But this was only the beginning. As the battle came to an end, the humans could hardly believe what they had accomplished. Their once lost fleet had just taken down a powerful enemy force, and the Council's first strike against them had been crushed. The victory was more than just a military won, it was a message to the galaxy. Humanity was no longer a forgotten race, no longer exiled to the outer reaches of space. They had returned, and they had power. The victory, however, came at a cost. Many of humanity's ships had been damaged, and the remaining forces were now scattered. But this, too, had a purpose. The victory, though hard fought, would rally the human colonies. They would rebuild. They would become stronger. In the wake of the battle, Captain Elias addressed his crew. "We've shown them what we're capable of," he said, his voice firm, "but this is just the beginning. We will not stop until the Galactic Council answers for what they did to us. They thought we were weak, but now they will see the full force of humanity's might." With those words, the human fleet set its course for the heart of the galaxy. They were not just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting for revenge. The Galactic Council had cast humanity out, but now humanity would return the favor. The Council had made a mistake in underestimating them. They had unleashed a storm, one that the galaxy would not soon forget. The first phase of humanity's war for vengeance had ended, but the real battle was only just beginning. The human fleet, now united and stronger than ever, set its sights on the next phase of their mission, striking directly at the Council's most important worlds. They had no time to waste. The Council had to be stopped before they could regroup and retaliate. Humanity's banners were already rising across the stars, casting a long shadow over the galaxy. Asterisk, a reckoning approaches. The galaxy had never been the same since humanity's rise. The Galactic Council, once an indomitable force, was now on the back foot, its grip on the galaxy slipping with each victory humanity claimed. The battle at the outer colonies had sent a shockwave through the entire galaxy. No one had expected humanity, long considered a weak and isolated species, to strike back with such force. The Council's arrogance had led them to underestimate the humans. Now, humanity was not just a race in exile, they were a force to be reckoned with. As the human fleet moved deeper into the heart of the galaxy, the Council's reaction was swift and ruthless. Their leaders, desperate to maintain control, summoned their most powerful allies. Massive war fleets, the likes of which humanity had never seen, were being assembled. The Council, though shaken, still had overwhelming power, and they were not about to let humanity's rebellion continue unchecked. The human fleet, however, was not deterred. Captain Elias, now known as a hero across human colonies, understood that the next battle would decide everything. The Council would come for them with everything they had, and humanity had to be ready. But there was a problem. Despite their recent victory, the human fleet was not as powerful as it appeared. They had the will to fight, but they were vastly outnumbered. The warships, though formidable, were not invincible, and the fleet's resources were dwindling. Desperation began to creep in, and that's when something unexpected happened. A message arrived, an encrypted transmission intercepted by humanity's fleet. It was from an unknown source, one that had been monitoring humanity's rise from the shadows. The message was simple but chilling. The Council is not your only enemy. There are others, far more dangerous, who are watching. The warning came from a race known as the Zalith, a powerful and ancient species that had been in hiding for millennia. Their motives were unclear, but their power was undeniable. The Zalith had no love for the Galactic Council, but they were not allies of humanity either. They were a race that thrived on chaos, on watching the downfall of the strongest civilizations. They had seen the rise of humanity and knew that they could be useful, but only as pawns in a much larger game. Captain Elias was faced with a choice. The Zalith had offered an alliance, but their true intentions were shrouded in mystery. Elias knew that trusting them could be a dangerous game, but their power could shift the balance of the war in humanity's favor. It was a gamble, one that could either lead to victory or doom. Humanity's cause forever. Elias called a council meeting with his top officers to discuss the offer. His ship, the Vanguard, had become a symbol of humanity's strength, but the decision before him could either lead to their ultimate success or their downfall. The officers, many of whom had lost friends and family in the war, were divided. Some were willing to accept the Zalith's offer, believing that any alliance, no matter how risky, was better than facing the Council alone. Others, however, were hesitant. The Zalith had their own agenda, and trusting them could be humanity's undoing. After much deliberation, Elias made the decision. Humanity would take the risk. They would meet with the Zalith, but they would not blindly trust them. It was a dangerous path, but it was the only path forward. As the meeting concluded, a sense of unease filled the room. They knew what they were about to face. The Zalith were powerful, yes, but their true motives were unknown. Humanity had already been betrayed once by the Galactic Council. Could they afford to risk another betrayal? The human fleet, now united and stronger than ever, began to move toward the location where the Zalith had arranged their meeting. The vast expanse of space stretched out before them, an empty void where anything could happen. The tension was palpable. The Zalith had promised to meet them in the neutral zone, a region of space where no race held dominion. It was an area of uncertainty, but for humanity, it was the only option. As they neared the meeting point, an eerie silence filled the fleet. The crew aboard the ships remained alert, their eyes constantly scanning the void for any sign of the Zalith. No one knew what to expect. The Zalith were a race of mystery, and their reputation for manipulating others was well known. But the humans had no choice. They had to meet them. The future of their fight for freedom depended on it. When they arrived, the Zalith ships appeared from the darkness, their massive forms emerging like shadows in the depths of space. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, dark, and ominous. The fleet's communications officer received a transmission. and a single Zalith representative appeared on the holographic screen. "You've come to us, humans." The voice was cold, almost indifferent. "We've been watching your progress. You've stirred something in the galaxy that cannot be ignored. But do not mistake our interest for alliance. We simply wish to see the destruction of the Galactic Council." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The Zalith had no loyalty to humanity, but they did have a shared enemy. It was a delicate balance, one that could tilt either way. Captain Elias steeled himself. They could not trust the Zalith, but they needed their help to stand a chance against the overwhelming power of the Council. The humans, with the Zalith at their side, would launch their next strike. The Council had made a fatal mistake in underestimating humanity, and now they would see what happens when a species that has been exiled rises to claim its place in the galaxy. The rise of the new empire, humanity's once forgotten warships, now sailed through the void with a new sense of purpose. The alliance with the Zalith had given them an edge, but it was still unclear whether they could truly trust the ancient race. Yet, Captain Elias knew they had no choice. The Galactic Council, with its centuries of dominance, had just unleashed their ultimate weapon. This new superweapon, unlike anything humanity had seen, could obliterate entire fleets in a matter of seconds. The time for negotiation was over. It was time for action, as the human fleet and the Zalith ships moved towards the heart of Council. Space tension gripped the crew. The Zalith had promised to stand with them, but their motives remained murky. Elias was acutely aware of this. They were allies, but only for now. In the dark of space, nothing was certain. The Council, with its overwhelming firepower, was ready for them, and they would stop at nothing to maintain control. Every second that ticked by brought them closer to their final confrontation. Humanity's fleet had been through countless battles, but none like the one that loomed ahead. The stakes were higher than ever before. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming what had been taken from them, their rightful place among the stars. The Zalith, with their unmatched power, had made a bold promise. Together, they would destroy the Council's new weapon. But would they? Or would they abandon humanity at the last moment, just as the Council had done? Captain Elias paced the command deck of the Vanguard, his thoughts consumed by the weight of the mission. The alliance with the Zalith was a risk, but it was their only option. He couldn't afford to let doubt cloud his judgment now. He looked to his officers, their faces grim but resolute. They had been through hell together, and now they were on the verge of something monumental. "We fought to get here," Elias said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "The Council's superweapon is a threat to all of us, not just humanity. If we don't stop it now, everything we've worked for, everything we've lost, will be for nothing. We will make our stand here, and we will win." The crew nodded in agreement. The time for hesitation was long gone. This was the final battle. But as the fleet continued its journey toward the Council's heart, a new signal began to emerge. From deep within the galaxy, a signal that sent chills down Elias' spine. It was the Council's superweapon, and it was already active. Reports flooded in from the scout ships. The superweapon was a massive, planet-sized ship, capable of deploying devastating energy blasts that could erase entire fleets with a single shot. The Council had never hesitated to show their might, and now they were preparing to make their move. The countdown was already ticking. If humanity didn't act fast, the galaxy would be at the mercy of the Council's power. The human fleet was not alone in this fight. The Zalith, though enigmatic and self-serving, had kept their word. Their ships had proved invaluable in the previous battles, their advanced technology giving humanity the edge they needed. But the true test was yet to come. The Zalith's fleet, though formidable, was not invincible. The Council's new superweapon could wipe them all out in a single shot. But humanity had something the Council did not: determination. As they neared the Council's stronghold, the fleet took formation, each ship in position, weapons primed. The superweapon loomed ahead, massive and menacing, its dark silhouette blocking out the stars. Humanity's fleet was ready to strike, but so was the Council. The battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy was about to begin. The first shots were fired from the superweapon. The blast hit a nearby Zalith ship, disintegrating it in an instant. The shockwave spread across the fleet, throwing ships off course. The Zalith returned fire, but their weapons seemed insignificant against the sheer scale of the Council's power. Humanity's ships moved quickly, weaving through the incoming fire. The Vanguard led the charge, its weapons blazing as it moved towards the heart of the superweapon. But as they closed in, a new threat emerged, an unexpected twist. The Council had deployed an army of drone-swarming mechanical creatures designed to defend their superweapon. These drones, though small, were fast and deadly, tearing through the human and Zalith ships with relentless precision. The human fleet was forced to divide its forces, some engaging the drones while others focused on the superweapon. Captain Elias stood firm at the helm of the Vanguard, guiding his ship through the chaos. The drones were relentless, but humanity's resolve was stronger. They fought back with everything they had, using every tactic and strategy they had learned over the course of the war. The drones, though numerous, could not withstand the precision and ferocity of the human fighters. But then disaster struck. A single drone broke through the human defenses and locked onto the Vanguard. The ship shook violently as the drone's energy beams struck it, sending sparks flying through the command deck. The crew scrambled to regain control, but the damage was severe. The superweapon was just ahead, and they couldn't afford to lose their flagship now. "Hold on," Elias shouted. "We're not stopping. We will finish this." With the human fleet battling the drones and the Zalith trying to keep the superweapon at bay, Elias made a decision. He knew what had to be done. The Vanguard was their last chance to disable the superweapon before it could destroy them all. He ordered the ship to move closer to the core of the weapon, dodging incoming blasts and drones. The final push was a gamble. The superweapon's core was heavily guarded, and the chances of survival were slim. But Elias had no choice. With a steady hand, he guided the Vanguard toward the heart of the superweapon. The ship's weapons fired one last time, sending a barrage of energy into the core. There was a blinding flash, and then silence. The Council's superweapon had been destroyed. The galaxy had been saved, but the cost had been immense.